What drives someone to dive into the depths of a dark underwater cave, knowing that every move could be their last? On a quiet February evening, 3 seasoned divers entered Jacob's Well. They were prepared, experienced, and determined to map the uncharted depths. But something went terribly wrong. One diver, Wayne Russell, vanished without a trace during their ascent. Was it a miscalculation? Or did the cave itself, with its unforgiving silence and crushing darkness, claim him? Let's uncover the haunting mystery of Wayne's final dive into Jacob's Well. Jacob's Well is a natural wonder in Texas Hill Country, not far from Wimberley, Texas. This deep underwater cave system is a perennial karstic spring that flows from the bed of Cypress Creek. Managed by the Hays County Parks Department, the spring sits on 80 acres of protected land known as the Jacob's Well Natural Area. Visitors can find the entrance at 1699 Mount Sharp Road in Wimberley, although swimming in its clear blue waters is currently prohibited. The well itself has a circular opening, about 12 feet in diameter, and descends vertically for roughly 30 feet before angling downward through a series of silt-filled chambers. This unique cave system reaches an average depth of 120 feet, with the longest explored passage stretching over 4,500 feet from the surface. A secondary passage splits off and extends about 1,000 feet from the main conduit, creating a complex and narrow maze that only experienced divers dare to explore. Jacob's Well is more than just a swimming hole. It's an artesian spring with a rich history and significant geological features. The spring is fed by the Trinity Aquifer, a major water source in Texas. In the early days, settlers discovered the spring and watched as its waters gushed with tremendous force, sometimes shooting 170 gallons per second into the air. They named it Jacob's Well for its biblical grandeur, and used it for drinking water and later to power a sawmill. Over the years, development in the area has affected the spring's output, and it no longer flows as powerfully as it once did. Today, it feeds into Cypress Creek, which winds through Wimberley before joining the Blanco River. The cool, inviting waters of Jacob's Well has made it a popular destination for visitors seeking relief from Texas's scorching summer heat. Many visitors enjoy lounging around the well's edge, or jumping from the surrounding rock ledges into the narrow opening below. Free divers, drawn by the allure of the cave's hidden depths, sometimes descend over 100 feet into its twisting passageways. However, this beautiful spot can be deceivingly dangerous. Exploring the well's underwater passages requires highly specialized skills, equipment, and experience due to its narrow, maze-like corridors. Unfortunately, Jacob's Well has claimed the lives of several divers over the years. Between 1964 and 1984 alone, 9 people, 8 men and 1 woman, lost their lives in the challenging and unpredictable environment. Some of these divers encountered passageways so tight that they had to remove their air tanks in order to squeeze through. This, combined with the sheer depth of the cave, makes Jacob's Well one of the most dangerous diving spots in the world. Today, visitors come to see this natural gem and to experience the awe-inspiring beauty of one of Texas's longest submerged caves. The Jacob's Well Natural Area is open to the public, and while visitors can no longer swim, they can still admire the well's deep blue waters and enjoy the scenic trails around it. For some, Jacob's Well is a serene place to relax and escape the heat, while for others, its depths represent a world of mystery and risk, a fascinating yet perilous natural wonder hidden within Texas Hill Country. It was a quiet Sunday evening on February 26, 1984, when 3 divers decided to explore the depths of Jacob's Well near Wimberley, Texas. This group was made up of 2 diving instructors, John Wilcox and Danny Self, along with an experienced cave diver named Wayne Russell, a 36-year-old with over a decade of cave diving experience. Wayne Russell began his caving journey at the young age of 15 in 1962, quickly developing a passion for exploring underground worlds. Over the years, he became an experienced caver, venturing into caves across California, Texas, and Mexico. His main focus was on mapping and photographing caves, especially water caves, which he explored extensively in Texas and Mexico. Wayne was a dedicated member of the National Speleological Society, also known as the NSS, and even joined its cave diving section, though he was not officially certified as a cave diver. His love for caving went beyond personal exploration. He was a leader in the caving community, serving as vice chairman and chairman of the Texas Speleological Association during the 1970s. He also played a key role in founding several caving clubs, helping to grow the community of cave explorers. Now, in addition to his passion for caves, Wayne worked as a mail carrier in Austin. Despite his full-time job, he made time for his love of cave exploration and photography. His dedication and adventurous spirit made him a respected figure in the caving world, known for his contributions to mapping and documenting the hidden beauty of caves. Although they were skilled divers, their decision to dive that evening came with a sense of urgency and risk. This was technically a trespass, as they hadn't gotten the landowner's permission. They were there for a quick mapping dive, hoping to measure and understand the structure of the cave's chambers without drawing too much attention. In preparation, the divers made sure to bring good equipment. Each wore a single 80 cubic foot long air tank, along with a depth and pressure console to track their location and air levels. They also each carried 3 lights, essential for navigating the pitch-black cave waters, and left an additional 50 cubic foot tank at the 25-foot mark as a precaution. To maintain their orientation in the cave, they placed a guideline at intervals, securing it at key depths, 25 feet, 50 feet, 75 feet, and finally 90 feet. Despite these preparations, the hurried nature of the dive meant that they may have overlooked some safety details. The cave's twisting passages and narrow tunnels added an extra layer of danger that could turn even a small mistake into a life-threatening situation. As the divers made their final checks, they could feel the thrill and excitement of the unknown ahead. Cave diving was their passion, and this was a chance to explore the hidden chambers of one of Texas's most mysterious underwater caves. Jacob's Well is notoriously dangerous, with narrow tunnels and sudden drops that could disorient even the most experienced diver. But for Wilcox, Self, and Russell, this was part of the excitement. They had discussed their goals for the dive, laid out their equipment, and prepared mentally for the challenges that awaited them. As the divers slipped into the cool, clear waters of Jacob's Well, they felt the familiar rush of excitement that came with every dive. For seasoned divers like John Wilcox, Danny Self, and Wayne Russell, this was more than just a simple underwater exploration. It was an adventure. They were eager to map out deeper parts of the cave, to see what lay hidden in the dark, winding passageways beneath the surface. With each dive, the 3 experienced divers were stepping into a world that few ever got to see. The descent began smoothly, with each diver following the guideline that they had carefully placed along the way. They dropped vertically about 25 feet through the entrance shaft and into the first chamber, where the water felt calm and visibility was relatively good. Each diver moved carefully, watching their equipment, each other, and the surroundings as they prepared to go even deeper. In the first chamber, the descent was comfortable, and the divers were feeling confident. They took their time, adjusting lights, monitoring air pressure, and maintaining control, aware that one wrong move could bring unexpected challenges. As they moved deeper, they could feel the cave beginning to close in. The walls grew tighter, and the water turned darker as they reached the 4th chamber. This point marked the beginning of a more intense part of the dive, where visibility could quickly disappear if disturbed. The floor of the chamber was covered in fine silt. Any sudden movement could cause the silt to rise, clouding the water and making it impossible to see even a few inches ahead. Here, claustrophobia was more than just a passing feeling, it was a real danger. In the underwater darkness, the slightest mistake could lead to serious trouble. Reaching the 4th chamber, the divers stopped to check their air pressure and make sure that they were on schedule. This was a key checkpoint where they would decide how much farther they could safely go. It was here that the team decided to briefly split up. Wilcox and Russell would move into the next chamber to continue mapping, while Self would stay in the fourth chamber to explore it further. The fourth chamber was more complicated than the previous ones, with a silt-covered floor that could cloud the water in an instant if disturbed, making visibility drop to 0. It was the kind of environment where every move had to be calculated. Any accidental kick of the silt could turn the water into a blinding cloud, blocking out any light and creating an intense feeling of claustrophobia. Yet, for experienced cave divers, this was all part of the adventure, the calculated risk that made their passion so exhilarating. Moving forward, Wilcox and Russell entered the fifth chamber, which was even more narrow than the previous ones. Here, Russell attached a 100-foot survey tape to get accurate measurements, while Wilcox captured the scene with his underwater camera. This chamber felt like an untouched world. The quiet darkness was almost overwhelming, as if they were the first to ever set foot, or fin, in this hidden space. The sense of isolation was strong, but so was the thrill, knowing that they were deep within Jacob's Well, far from where most people ever dared to venture. Soon after, they entered into the sixth chamber. By now, the passageways were extremely tight, forcing them to be even more cautious with every movement. The lights barely cut through the thick darkness, creating an atmosphere of eerie isolation. Russell, focused on his survey tape, gave Wilcox the signal that it was time to turn back. They both knew that time was running out. Any delay could be risky with their air supplies running low. They needed to return to safer ground. As they began to head back, Russell stayed behind for a few moments, possibly adjusting his equipment or making sure that the tape was securely placed. Wilcox moved ahead, making his way back to the fourth chamber, where he met Self. Self, noticing only Wilcox, immediately signaled with a questioning gesture, "Where's Wayne?" Wilcox pointed behind him, indicating that Russell should be following. At that moment, he believed that Russell was just a few seconds behind, maybe double-checking their line or adjusting his tank. But the seconds stretched into minutes, and still there was no sign of Russell. The weight of the situation began to settle on them. Their air supplies were already low, and the longer they waited, the more they risked their own safety. They had no choice but to keep moving towards the surface, making decompression stops along the way. With every stop, their worry for Russell deepened. They hoped desperately that he would emerge soon, maybe having taken a different route, or delayed by a minor issue. Yet, as they surfaced, there was no sign of him. The realization hit hard. They had lost contact with their friend deep within Jacob's Well. When they reached the surface at around 9:16 p.m., Russell was still missing. As they waited at the surface, concern turned to fear, and the reality of the situation became clear. It was now a question of life and death, and they could do nothing but wait, hoping that Russell would somehow emerge from the darkness of the well. After several agonizing minutes, they had no choice but to notify the authorities. Wilcox and Self quickly contacted the sheriff's office. The news was chilling. A diver was missing in the deep, dark confines of Jacob's Well, with no way to know if he was trapped, disoriented, or worse. The rescue effort began with divers and emergency personnel gathering at the well to conduct a thorough search. The next day, after an extensive and careful dive, the rescue team discovered Russell's body lying on the safety line in the fifth chamber. His tank was empty, and he had not managed to reach the additional air supply left at the 25-foot mark. The official cause of death was ruled as drowning, and it's believed that Russell may have run out of air or possibly suffered from nitrogen narcosis, a dangerous condition caused by high levels of nitrogen in the bloodstream that can impair judgment and motor skills. This tragic incident is another example of how unpredictable and dangerous cave diving can be, even for experienced divers. There were no clear signs of what went wrong, No equipment failure, no obvious error. Yet, it ended in the heartbreaking loss of a life. Why didn't Wayne Russell continue to ascend with the others? Perhaps his air supply ran out faster than he expected. Or maybe he was affected by nitrogen narcosis, which can confuse and disorient even skilled divers. The exact reason will remain a mystery, hidden in the depths of Jacob's Well. Sturk Fontaine is one of the most important areas for paleontology and anthropology research. Otherwise known as Strong Spring, this remote African cave system is a treasure trove of ancient humans and our distant ancestors. But one brave explorer fell prey to Sturk Fontaine's death trap: underwater caves that have been killing humans for millennia. Today, we're covering the race against time to rescue a Sturk Fontaine cave diver that turned into a marathon that shocked the caving world back in the 80s. Sturk Fontaine, otherwise known as Strong Spring, is a limestone cave system at the World Heritage Site known as the Cradle of Humankind. The Cradle of Humankind is located 31 miles north of Johannesburg, which is the 26th largest city in the world and the capital of the wealthiest province in South Africa. The Cradle of Humankind was created to study the area and to protect the land. It's a haven for paleontologists and archaeologists. Paleontologists study fossils to uncover how animals lived in different periods of time, and archaeologists study the ancient cultures of our ancestors. Researchers in the region are most interested in researching hominins, or the branch of evolution that humans came from. Research at Cradle of Humankind is mostly done in two caves, the Maropang and Sturk Fontaine. The first human-ape fossils found at the Cradle of Humankind were discovered in the Sturk Fontaine caves in 1935 by Robert Broom, a medical doctor and paleontologist who made a number of valuable discoveries. In the Maropang Cave, 92 different hominid species have been discovered. A single chamber in Sturk Fontaine, the Dinaledi chamber, houses over 1,500 fossils from the Homo naledi species of humans. No other site in Africa has as many fossils from any one species. In total, over 90,000 fossils have been unearthed there, and roughly 40% of the world's ancestral fossils have been found exclusively at Cradle of Humankind. Out of the two caves, Maropang is open to visitors with a museum that showcases the skeletal fossils and the ancient tools that were used by our ancestors. The museum also has a tour of Maropang that extends into Sturk Fontaine, and the tour also lets visitors see active excavations. The Sturk Fontaine, or Strong Spring Caves, are made of dolomitic limestone dating back over 20 million years. The dolomite portion of the cave dates back 2.58 billion years when the region was at the bottom of a sea, but the modern caves began forming when weak acids and rainwater were absorbed by the porous limestone, which eventually carved out tunnels and chambers. Some of the spots where rainfall collected on the surface became massive potholes, and animal bones built up at the bottom of these vertical shafts after they unknowingly fell in or died and were thrown in over the years. Different portions of the cave have different entrances, including a massive hole leading to the big cave portions, while the Windgat portion has a narrow 40 feet deep chimney hole for its entrance. The Windgat portion of Sturk Fontaine has some of the most impressive speleothems in the caves, with massive stalagmites, huge flowstone, curvy curtains, and crystallized ferns. Wildlife species also inhabit the cave, including the petiolata wasps that swarm on the cave ceilings and create colonies much like ants with special social roles. The caves at Sturk Fontaine were first used as limestone mines almost half a century before Robert Broom uncovered the first ape fossils at the Cradle of Humankind. The limestone was converted to lime, which was used to process gold. Dynamite blasts from the miners eventually revealed the entrance to the cave system. In 1890, the first non-human fossils were discovered in the caves. World War II put a halt to the excavation at Sturk Fontaine, but Dr. Broom came back later to find Mrs. Pless, a nearly intact skull from the species Australopithecus africanus, which was only recently redacted when new research uncovered the skull was from a male. While a number of important discoveries have been made at Sturk Fontaine, the cave has also been the site of international disasters. In 1984, the Sturk Fontaine caves were world-renowned, but they weren't under as much control as they are now. It would be another 15 years before the caves got protected status under the new governing body of the Cradle of Humankind. In recent years, South Africa has also enacted laws to preserve its caves, making it illegal to harm or take portions of caves without permission. That year, in 1984, 29-year-old Peter Verhul explored the cave with a group of two his friends. They were going cave diving in the Cradle of Humankind. In cave diving, there's one important rule: never let go of the guideline. Some guidelines are attached to the rock itself to provide a permanent safety measure for anyone diving in the cave. The only reasonable time anyone would let go of these lines would be during missions to lay new guidelines in the first place. This task can't be done by novice or even advanced divers. Permanent guidelines in underwater caves should only be set by experts in the field with proper equipment. More commonly, divers will use distance lines, which can be held in the hand and clipped onto scuba gear for added safety. The other end can be attached to a surface marker buoy for divers traveling roughly 160 feet, while exploration reels used for official or expert survey work can be bulky and hold over 2,000 feet of line. Cave divers usually need multiple reels that need to be attached to checkpoints. The guidelines themselves are made of white nylon, which provides the best visibility in low light and enough strength and buoyancy for most situations. Some deep cave dives require divers to map out the placement of various temporary guidelines. Teams will make knots or use line markers to mark different distances along the route. Cave reels use adjustable drag so that the line can be recovered or laid down at swimming speed. Divers of any experience level should carry safety spools which can be used in an emergency, like if the line breaks. Cave divers have to keep tension on their own guidelines at all times to avoid snagging the line on sharp rocks or wrapping the line around other divers. Divers laying permanent lines have to be aware of the space to ensure the line is visible at all times. Sometimes, inexperienced divers will fit through a narrow hole and lay down guiding line through the hole, but if they're skinny or smaller in stature, they might not realize that other people can't follow the line. They also might not realize how the passage travels in the opposite direction. If the hole is too narrow to pass through for most people, or if the return trip is too dangerous, these amateur lines become line traps, and they can easily kill. On September 29, 1984, Peter Verhul followed behind his two friends. He wasn't as experienced as his friends, so he should have been in the middle where the two could watch him, but they kept him in the back, trailing behind. Unfortunately, Peter ignored the safety rules for cave divers. He only brought a single light and one scuba tank or self-contained underwater breathing apparatus, and he only brought one light source. It's always smart to carry at least one smaller emergency tank, if not a full-sized backup. Small emergency tanks can be placed on the arm, back, side, or the stomach of divers. These units are separated from the main tank, and divers have to activate the emergency tanks so that they don't drain during normal use. Of course, this was the 80s when equipment wasn't as good, and the dangers of caving weren't broadcast to the whole world online. Peter and his friends were diving in the ancient recesses of the Sturk Fontaine caves when Peter let go of the guideline. Without a guideline of his own, he took off to explore a side passage. His friends waited. Unable to speak underwater, they eventually signaled in silence. One by one, they followed in his direction. Darkness surrounded them with only algae-covered rock in all directions. After a few heart-pounding minutes, they found Peter and took him back to the guideline. A few minutes later, and Peter's adventurous side took over once more. He veered off from the guideline and his fins kicked silt up as he swam into a dark tunnel. His friends took chase and grabbed him, nearly pulling him back to the path and back to the tenuous safety of the bright white nylon rope. They kept advancing through the flooded ventricles of the Cradle of Humankind. Peter felt more confident after being found twice, and, without signaling to his friends, he swam off a third time into the unknown. This time, his friends kept swimming. Eventually, they paused and turned around to find Peter had vanished. After the distance they had traveled, there were many passages he could have gone through, so they tried waiting. They kept waiting, and after uncomfortable minutes greeted only by the sounds from their own eerie breathing and their ever-increasing heart rate pounding in their ears. After they waited for what felt like eternity in the flooded tubes below an African fossil field, the two other divers grabbed their safety spools and backtracked. The two divers couldn't move quickly because their safety guidelines had to be accounted for. They couldn't let out too much at once, they couldn't take sharp turns, and they had to be wary of each other to avoid getting tangled. Eventually, they got warning signs that their oxygen was low. The two friends had no choice but to head back to the surface. After a frantic escape from the strong spring, they immediately called for rescue teams. Heroic rescuers made the dive. Nothing. They ventured deeper with more guidelines to explore the side routes. No sign of Peter. He had simply disappeared. Eventually, hope ran out for finding their friend alive, but they kept trying and switched the focus to a recovery effort. After 6 weeks of searching, the bulk of the rescue team packed up and went home. A few divers weren't deterred by the main operation ending. They kept diving. Eventually, they found a hole leading out of the main cave, which lead out of the sump and onto walkable pathway. They found footprints in the muddy waters of this deep, dark crevice. In an island in the distance, they found Peter crumpled on the ground, dead. Peter Verhul joined the thousands of ancient humans who also died in the cave. An autopsy revealed he had survived 3 weeks in perpetual darkness. It wasn't oxygen or exposure that got him, but rather he died of starvation while desperately awaiting rescue. Nearby, they found a message in the sand Peter had scrawled addressed to his wife and his mother, where he wrote how much he loved them. In another sad twist to the story, the Cradle of Humankind closed the underground lake portion of the cave, so no surveyors can explore the depths of Sturk Fontaine, and the full depth of the cave, one of humanity's most important archaeological sites, remains unknown. Out of all of the possible caves, underwater caves like those at Sturk Fontaine are by far the most deadly. While rocks can collapse or people can get lost, there are way more dangers with diving, and it's nearly impossible to survive a mistake. Peter's death was tragic, but it also inspired divers to remember the importance of guidelines. His last message was seared into the hearts and minds of cavers everywhere, a harsh reminder to bring backups and make safety the top priority. Did you learn anything about cave diving in this video? Did you know anything about South Africa's impressive caves? Let us know in the comments section. While you're there, follow the guideline and reel in those like and subscribe buttons so you don't miss the next video.